Here at First Fruit Taz, we are especially blessed by viewers who donate, making it possible for me to offer you one-to-one opportunities and webinars free of charge. You can also connect with other viewers on First Fruit Taz group on Facebook. Find all this by clicking on the link in the details box below this video. Be sure to take every word before the Lord for confirmation. Okay guys, I admit I've used a provocative title there to get your attention, but I really do want to talk to you today about conspiracy theories, because some of you have been coming to me and saying, research this, tell everybody about this, dumb tunnels, 5G, it goes on and on. And you know what? I'm not here to tell you that all that stuff isn't true, but I'm here to tell you that, for a start, God doesn't want this ministry to be informing people about that stuff. That's not why God created this ministry. And I'm going to share a testimony to highlight that. And it is something that I've said before, but people are still bringing this content to me. And I have been in conversation with some of you. Some of you who are bringing this content to me are powerful intercessors, and I can see very clearly that that is why God puts these issues on your radar. And what I would say to you is be very mindful of your self-care. Try to find strategies to cope emotionally as you intercede on behalf of those in need. I would also say, don't think that because people don't talk about these issues that they're not interceding. Don't think that because people aren't aware of these issues they're not interceding. So one of the stories I want to share with you is back about a year ago when New York passed the first of the, well, it was the first that I was aware of, the full-term abortion laws. And I do want to speak very briefly on that, and that is that a lot of people would say, gee, mothers are terrible to want to abort at full term. It wouldn't be the mothers aborting at full term. There are scenarios where women are forced to have an abortion or forced to terminate the child, and the system uses medical reasons to bring that about and to force that on the women. Okay, so it's very easy to jump in and blame the mothers. It's not the mothers. What woman would choose to carry a child for 9 months and then choose to have it destroyed in her womb? Okay, it's just, yeah. Occasionally you might find someone who's really sick that would do that, but actually what you would find if you dug a little bit is that it's not the mothers, it's people in the medical system. And if you want to talk conspiracies, there are plenty of suspects who would use that law, okay, who would invoke that law. So I wanted to touch on that very briefly. Now, at the time that that law was being passed in New York, it was night time here in Tasmania. And for the first time ever, I felt led into deep intercession. I had experienced intercession by my own choice initially in late 2017, and I didn't realize it was intercession. But when I spoke to somebody later about that experience, they confirmed, oh, that's called intercession. Then God asked me to intercede for a church that was at risk of being sold, and that was just a brief session of intercession. But when New York was sitting and making this decision about these abortion laws, God had me on my knees in prayer, and I did not even know what I was in intercession over. So this is my first point, is that we don't even need to know about these things for God to use us in prayer to fight them. Many of my viewers have experienced all sorts of trauma, and they don't need to be triggered by knowing, by seeing more of this kind of content. A lot of these things are not going to be resolved by activism. I have a kind of an activist past. I was in the sustainable living movement, so I was living it. I was living as self-sufficiently and sustainably as possible, and I was educating all around my state of Tasmania on that. I was also active at a global level. So my very first YouTube channel actually had a video that slowly made it to over 8,000 views, and I noticed, interestingly, that that video has been removed from YouTube, and I'm not sure why. That video was raising awareness of peak oil, and I'm not going into that topic, but you can research it for yourself. I've been there. I've been that person who was earnestly trying to educate other people. Now I want to share with you the lesson that God has given me. I have had personal experiences with the pedophile rings, corruption, that sort of thing. I have paperwork, evidence that could bring down some very nasty people. But God has not led me to do that. Interestingly, He has led me to start this channel as my main focus, where I'm spreading light and love and encouragement and encouraging a whole new generation of ministries and messengers for God. I had an experience a couple of years ago where my day, which normally ran like clockwork, had a few disruptions, which meant that there was very specific timing when I collected my daughters and parked at McDonald's, and I normally wouldn't go to McDonald's. So there were a few differences in my day, and while we were parked at McDonald's, a kidnapping played out in front of me. And it happened so quickly. I was joining the dots as it was happening, but I wasn't connecting the dots quickly enough to intercede in the natural. And a few hours later, I went back to the bed and breakfast I was staying at. And I said to God, why did you have me witness that? It was very clear that He had allowed my day to be manipulated so that I would witness that. And I said, why would you have me witness that? And His reply, I paraphrase, but He had me bless the two princes. So He led me to look into prophetic ministries, basically, Derek Prince and Joseph Prince. And what He was showing me is that usually there's no great value in us interceding in the natural. For example, I could have interfered with what was going on there, but a judge could have overridden me entirely. You know, I could have rescued that child from the kidnapper, and yet 4 weeks down the track, they might have ended up in court and the child be placed with the kidnapper. You just don't know what's going to play out in the natural. Another example is if you know a child is being sexually abused, you can report that to Child Protective Services, but there are regions, and it's probably most regions, where the pedophile rings have mechanisms set up to ensure that once that child is in the family court setting, they are actually removed from the mother. The mother gets denigrated, invalidated, discredited, and so the children get placed with their abuser. So we can think that we're doing a good thing, but we can actually be helping the enemy. So what God was showing me is that there are spiritual ways to address these issues. And so the value of telling everybody about these issues, the value of being angry or fearful about these issues, the value of sharing information about these issues is extremely limited. For example, what are you going to do about 5G? We've seen people protest and protest and protest about different issues over the years, over the decades. And honestly, there's very rarely is there a helpful outcome. I think of the climate change protests. I don't believe those have changed anything. I haven't seen any change in Tasmania. However, the people who are actively living it in their own life are the ones who are starting up the solar panel businesses and that sort of thing. So there are ways to approach these issues without going head on into conflict, without being hugely public in our anger, our fear, maybe I feel strongly about this because my father has always been a very angry activist type person. And it wasn't pleasant to live with. As a child, we were living with someone who was always seemed grumpy, and he wasn't grumpy at us usually. He was a loving father. But there was just this aura, this ambience in the home all the time of anger, and you would feel tense as a child, not knowing when he would fire up about one topic or another. He also spent a lot of energy on lawsuits. So my mother told me once that he'd had a lawsuit against a real estate company for something like 20 years because he'd signed a contract that he probably shouldn't have, but he really didn't have a comeback because they had operated within the law. It wasn't ethical, it wasn't moral, but it was within the law. So my key points that I want to give you here are that yes, there's terrible atrocities going on around the world. Terrible atrocities. There can be positive outcomes. For example, because of the traumatic experiences I've had, I can make space for my viewers, and I can believe my viewers. Whatever they're telling me, I can be available to them without doubting what you tell me, without judging you, without casting aspersions on what you're telling me, and without me being traumatized. So there's that value. And then there are those of you who are called as powerful intercessors. And I think that being in the world in general can be very exhausting for you. And so I really want to honour those of you who are called to intercession. And, you know, some of you do share details with me, and that's fine. You'll send, you know, conspiracy reports and that sort of thing, and that's fine. I can choose how much I view of that and whether or not I view it. But at the end of the day, when you call to me to raise awareness of these things on my channel, that is not what God has called me to do. That is not how God has called me to respond to these things. The way God has asked me to respond to these things is in love, in purity, in light, by keeping my eyes on Jesus, by responding spiritually. He's been leading people through a process of spiritual cleansing, culminating at this stage. There might be further steps I'm not aware of, but culminating in the courts of heaven. And I would say to you, if you're somebody who gets swept up in the conspiracy theories, but you have not gone through a process of spiritual purification and gone through the more mature steps of the courts of heaven, then absolutely please do that. It will put you in good standing. And we are, even if you are someone who God does bring this information before you, we are called to address it spiritually. Yes, He may call on some of us to address things in the natural. For example, you might receive revelation that you are to share your testimony on YouTube, or that you are to go on a TED Talk and share your experiences, something along those lines. Excuse me, this is my early morning voice. But for the most part, we are called into intercession, and God can work through people who are not led by God, who are not led by Holy Spirit, to carry out the natural battle. And the power is in your prayers, in your purity, and in your spiritual intercession. So I share this in love, and I understand that we're all coming from different places, but spreading the bad news is not how we're going to get through this in unity. Thank you, and God bless. Holy Father, I thank you for placing this video before those you intend to receive it. Financial support is welcome, and donations can be made by selecting the link in the details box below this video.